Hi, this is Svetlana from Cosplay, and you maybe have noticed that we work a lot with the original 3D models from video games to create our costumes and projects. This is so handy, especially since these 3D models are actually the perfect reference, and sometimes we can actually use them to create parts of costumes or props. And yeah, this actually happened, for example, for Yelan from Genshin Impact or Acheron from Honkai Star Rail. And I'm actually getting a lot of questions how we find these 3D models, so I thought I'm finally doing a video about that and show you how we do it and turn these 3D models into real-life costume pieces. And don't worry, you don't need a 3D printer at all for that. We actually handle everything with the magic of EVA foam. So let's start crafting. My example for this video will be Feixiao swords. Feixiao is actually the latest addition to Honkai Star Rail and was released in version 2.5. Check out the link in my video description and try out the game. It's a super fun turn-based role-playing game available for free for PC, PlayStation and mobile. Feixiao is a super strong hunt and wind character, and her design is just gorgeous. As a master of martial arts, she fights with a gigantic axe and 2 swords. And for this project, I'm going to show you how we made those swords. But first, let's grab her 3D model. As you may have noticed, many of our projects are from Hoyoverse games these days. Did you know though that they actually release the 3D models of every new character the day a new version goes online? You'll usually find them on special Bilibili websites, and that's also the reason why the internet gets flooded with silly character dance videos on patch day. Sadly though, those websites are a little bit hard to find since they are all in Chinese. But Google can fix that. For Feixiao, I literally just searched for a Feixiao 3D model and found this article on Hoyoverse. It's a link collection for all the previous Bilibili websites. You'll find the link in the video description, by the way. Here you just have to scroll all the way down, pick your favorite character, download the file and open it in the free 3D software Blender. But don't forget to download the Miko Dance model plugin to import it and activate the textures and proper shading. And again, Feixiao's design is just absolutely gorgeous. As you can see though, the 3D model is pretty flat and many details are actually only textures. So it's not detailed enough for a good 3D print, and you actually would have to rebuild the model if you want to print it. But it's good enough for an EVA foam build. I needed a blueprint first though. Benni used here several screenshots of the 3D model and began drawing all the shapes and details in Adobe Illustrator. This step takes quite some time, but it's far less work than building a new 3D model from scratch. Next, we had to figure out the size. For this, Benni compared the model of Feixiao and her weapons with a 3D scan of my own body. If we would be super accurate, her sword should be actually 155 cm long. But this felt way too big. So I decided to go with 130 cm instead. Now we could finally print and glue all the pages together. Let's see if I guessed the size correctly. Just had to take the fiberglass rod for stability, and what do you say? I think they look pretty good. No, seriously, I think 155 cm would look ridiculous. And it would be pretty difficult to pose with them as well. Next on the foam work. As you can see, the blueprint here is the perfect pattern and I'm going to use it through the whole project. Since I'm working with foam, cutting and gluing is pretty straightforward, but it takes a lot of time. Since we were working with a pretty tight deadline though, I decided to speed up the process with our beambox laser cutter. I was actually a little nervous about the stability, so we used a 3mm thick MDF wood for the inner core. Since I'm mostly working with 5mm and 10mm thick EVA foam layers, I had to stack up the wood to 5mm next. I actually kept the wood pretty small, so I wouldn't hit it once I Dremel all the sharp edges of the wood. The 3D model was also incredibly helpful to figure out the thickness of the sword parts, and that's also how I decided on which thickness I used for which layer. For stability, I also added a fiberglass rod, since the sword was actually pretty wobbly without it. So, and this was 1 day of work. And then we got a problem. The properly sized blueprint didn't fit to the foam build, as Benni forgot to scale the laser cutter files. They were just too big. Bad Benni. So I spent another day to build a new pair. Yay! Let's just pretend this didn't happen, okay? Next up, let's turn this foam sandwich into a proper blade. I used here the patterns and traced the shapes onto all sides, carved the material then super roughly with a sharp blade, and smoothed out everything nice and pretty with my Dremel. This step took actually 2 hours of work, but a nice result needs quite some time and patience. Reaching the inner side of the blade was far more tricky though. Benni meanwhile prepared the next few parts for all the gluing and sanding fun. By the way, I used here high density EVA foam as it's more sturdy and therefore better for props, and more suitable for a lot of Dremel work. The result just turns out smoother and cleaner. Obviously the laser cutter helped me a lot as well to get all those pieces super precise, but it would be absolutely doable by hand as well. My goal was just to finish both swords in only 1 week, and cutting everything by myself would cost me more time than I had. While the whole process was speed up like crazy with the laser cutter, sanding and gluing all those individual pieces still took forever. And I could barely feel my fingers after a few hours. Oh, and you might notice, when building such props, I also mostly try to figure out all the basic shapes, build them then individually and set them then together piece by piece. It's basically like a gigantic puzzle where you actually have to cut all the puzzle pieces by yourself first. This technique worked pretty nice though, and the base of Feixiao swords looked already pretty good. Now on to the details. This step was actually pretty fun and easy since I mostly only had to glue on some already pre-cut parts. Plus the glow up showed so fast. I worked here mostly with a ton of contact cement, but some of the smaller elements required superglue as well. And it's absolutely insane how detailed Hoyoverse designs are. So we were very thankful for having the 3D model. Even though we didn't use it directly, it was amazing to have access to the best possible reference. And even though this was just a foam build, I think we got pretty close to the original design of the swords. Well, and this was the result after 3 days of crafting, without counting in the first wrongly sized swords. What do you say? I was incredibly tired, but also super proud that we really made it in only 3 days. I think sculpting a new 3D model and 3D printing it out would actually take 3 times as long, at least. Okay, now it was time to give these foam props some color. As always with these builds, I first heat sealed my material and then applied 3 thick layers of Flexbond primer. Then it was Benni's turn on the airbrush. To begin, he added a white base color to both swords. Since the paint job was pretty bright, it made a lot more sense to start with white this time. After adding a few darker grey shadows to the grip, he masked off a strip on the top and then covered everything except the blade in more masking tape. After mixing a lot of different turquoise shades, he began applying a large gradient. First with the brighter colors and then bit by bit getting a little darker every time. Next, Benni used a part of the original paper blueprint to mark where he needed to add masking tape next. The blade actually has 2 different color gradients that are separated around the middle section. So after he carefully covered the one half, he then applied more colors to the other half. Again, first with the bright colors and then getting even darker than the first time. Now came the super annoying part. First we had to unmask everything to check if it all worked. So far so good, I think, looks clean. And then mask off everything except the golden detail parts. This step took us almost 5 hours for both swords. But since we did it together, it was still manageable. Then Benni added a brown base color for the next step. This helped to bring out the best possible coverage for the golden coat that came on top. He just had to make sure to reach every nook and cranny. And finally, the last unmasking for this project. Luckily, everything worked out just as it should. And I think the mountain of tape we left behind speaks for itself. Last but not least, Benni had to fix a few spots with a thin brush, add some delicate lines on the tip of the blade, and trace all the golden borders again with a dark brown edge. Benni actually has super steady hands and every brush stroke turned out perfect. The only thing missing now was a coat of satin spray varnish to seal in all the paintwork that he did. And finally as well the flint mechanism of the blade. So he quickly painted and sealed this one too, and I stuck it on with a tiny drop of super glue. Yay! And this was it. Both of Feixiao's swords were done and we are so proud of how they turned out. Benni and I worked for 6 days in total on this project, and I think you don't really see that they are just EVA foam, right? Really hope Hoyoverse will ask me to finish the whole costume one day as well. I really hope you enjoyed this video and like how Feixiao swords, or actually gunblades, turned out. I think Benni and I, we got pretty close to the original 3D model look, even though it's just EVA foam. But yeah, I'm really happy with the result. And as always, if you have any questions or any feedback, just leave me a comment down below. Or if you don't have anything to write, just write down Corgi and join the magical Corgi squad. And if you want to get into foam crafting yourself and want to make some props as well, actually have the book of foam props on cosplay.com, which is full of helpful tutorials and guides, available as a printed version or as an instant download on cosplay.com. And also thanks so much to Hoyoverse for their ongoing support. We created already so many awesome things from all of the games, and like the character designs are always so very well made, and you know, I just love to add like all those little details everywhere here and there, and even though it's also a little bit challenging, I would say, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. So please check out Honkai Star Rail, link in the video description down below. It's a really fun game, it's for free and full of amazing looking characters. And as always, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Also, thanks a lot for our lovely Patreons for their support, and see you in the very next video. Bye bye! Filmst du schon?